Okay, so hopefully you all know what you're here for, but there it is on the screen there. I'm here just to talk to you about whether or not your land, or any land that you might potentially be looking at, would potentially be suitable as a glamping business. So, who are we? We are Glamping. I can see a few familiar faces out there, so you may well have already been past our stand. We're just in the corner here, in conjunction with one of the manufacturers, Pod Factory. So Glamping, who we are a consultancy, and basically our sole purpose is to help you understand whether or not your land is going to work as a glamping business, and potentially hold your hand through the entire process of getting from trying to figure out whether or not it's going to work, right the way through to hopefully planning applications, pod orders, website building, marketing, absolutely every single step along the way, if you need us, of course. We can dip in, we can dip out, depending on whether or not you've got your own areas of expertise. So this is just a very brief kind of overview of a standard sort of customer journey, if you like, with us. So step one is always the most important one, is finding land for our clients. So obviously, hopefully, a lot of the people here today will already have land, and that you're either looking to diversify an existing business or potentially just monetize a bit of land that isn't already doing anything for you. And from there, step two is generally feasibility assessment, because that's what everybody wants to know. Is it even going to be possible? And if it is going to be possible, what are the hoops I'm going to have to jump through? What are the hurdles? And what's next? And you'll see the next steps from there are pre-planning and designing sites. Now, that is one of the questions we probably get asked most often at Glamping is, do I even need planning for this? Whether it's bell tents, yurts, pods, domes, shepherd's huts, you'll have probably seen all sorts of different accommodation as you've been wandering around the show today. The short answer, and the only answer that we can give from a professional perspective, is that yes, you absolutely do require planning permission if you intend to have these units on your site for any more than 28 days of the year. Now, unfortunately, there are a few people in the industry that won't echo that message, and there are some people that will tell you that you don't need planning if it's on wheels and various other kind of mixed messaging. But I'm here to tell you absolutely do require planning. So just protect yourselves and do things right. There are a few exceptions to the rules and things like exemption licenses and camping certificates, which I'm more than happy to discuss with you guys in more detail at another time. But in a nutshell, planning permission is your only guaranteed way to know that you're not going to have to look over your shoulder. So, just before I get into how we assess the feasibility of whether or not it's going to work for you, I just wanted to give you a very brief overview of the market as a whole. Again, this is the questions we get asked a lot, is whether or not it's even worth getting into. Has the market saturated? Is there actually still money to be made? Because, as you'll have seen, the market is growing rapidly. So, as you see there on the bar graph on the left-hand side, no surprise, the young millennials are absolutely the biggest market for the glamping trade at the moment. It is young couples looking to get away, take a picture of a champagne flute in a hot tub and stick it on Instagram, make their friends that can't afford it jealous. That's your key market. That's the industry that's going to drive most of your revenue. Outside of that, you do have the generation that came before them. So really your kind of key core market for glamping is 16-year-olds up to around 40-year-olds. That's not to say, obviously, that you won't get customers from the older generation, but that's just the kind of trend that we've seen in the market there. A couple of other little stats there. 62% of holidayers will consider taking a holiday within driving distance. A lot of people ask about where's the ideal site, where should I put it, who should I be marketing to. You really don't have to be far out of an urban hub to be able to provide a getaway to your clients. You can be as little as a few miles outside a town centre or a city centre, and that's all people need. They just want to escape their urban environment, have somewhere to switch off. And as you can see there, more than half of 25 to 34-year-olds plan to increase their UK-based holiday time. I'm sure it's not lost on the farmers that times are getting tighter in the wake of the budget last week. Some fairly devastating news for an awful lot of farm owners and business owners. Everybody's feeling the pinch, so staycation market is not going anywhere. Yes, it had a massive boom off the back of COVID, but it's here to stay. So on that front, whether or not the market is saturated and whether or not there's a future to the market, again, I'll not bore you to tears by taking you through every element of these graphs because I'm no statistician, but it's clear to see there has been a year-on-year compound annual growth rate for the glamping market in the UK for the last 3 to 4 years, and it is predicted to carry well on up to 2030. I know it's ironic that all these figures are in US dollars. That's not lost on me. It is for the UK market. It was just conducted by a US company. And frankly, I haven't got the brain to do the conversions in time to do the presentation for you. But I think you can all agree that the $210 million market is a fairly sizable market and one that we'd all like to get a little chunk of. So let's get to the crux of why we're actually here and what I came to talk to you about today. How can you know whether or not the land you want to use is suitable? Long story short, the way we do that for our customers is through something called a feasibility study or a feasibility assessment. Now, some of you may have already been to our stand and heard us talk about that today, in which case I'm sorry, this is going to sound very familiar. But the whole point of a feasibility study is to give you the peace of mind that this is going to be something that's worth pursuing, and also to give you a basic skeleton of what your kind of journey through the application process might look like, time frame wise and financially. So feasibility study is, by the time it's all said and done, it's generally about a 20 to 25 page written document that is specific to your piece of land. So we get you to give us a whole bunch of information on the land you've got, so coordinates, the area within your land that you might potentially be looking to site any project on. Now, if you're not sure where that might be and there's a few potential sites within your land and you're looking for a bit of advice, we can absolutely do that too. You can identify kind of option A, B and C and we can give you a bit of a steer. And from there we go away and do a written report that's broken down into the 4 main areas that you see in front of you. First and foremost, planning probability. It's everyone's most immediate concern, and if you're not going to get planning, then obviously there's not an awful lot of point in going much further. So what that section looks like is we break down who your council area have approved and who they've refused historically, and we show you a few examples of them. We then break down the reasons and the justifications for those decisions. So we show you which specific policies the planning officers have used and cited as part of that decision-making process. The whole point being that we can use that information to optimise any application that you might put in yourself going forward and really start to build a picture of what are the policies that they actually give weight to and what are policies they don't care too much about. I'm sure some of you have probably dealt with planning officers before, and unfortunately knowing the policies is one thing, but knowing how they actually apply them is quite often a completely different thing altogether. It's not always evenly applied, unfortunately. And it is quite often a case of massaging the ego of the planning officer by showing them that you do understand all the policies involved, even if they're not necessarily relevant to your own site. We'll come on to response times and things like that later, but planning officers, like any council body or government body, can effectively take as long as they want to get back to you, because once you've submitted your application, you're in their hands. And the most frustrating thing we see for our customers is, oh, you haven't mentioned policy 23 subsection B, try again, and they just fling your application back at you. So information is power, and it's all about building that information, saying, right, these are all the policies, this is whether or not they apply to us, and this is whether or not they're actually going to carry any weight. So once we get our head out of the books with the policies, we look at the more common sense considerations that a planning officer might also include. That could be things like, are you in a flood risk zone? Is your road access suitable for the amount of traffic that's going to be coming to your site? Do you have any land designations? Now, land designations is probably the most common hurdle that any landowner comes up against if they want to develop a glamping site. What I mean by land designations is things like greenbelt areas, areas of outstanding natural beauty, or as they're now called, national landscape areas. It can be public rights of way. A lot of people worry about things like neighbour complaints as well. So any factor that a planning officer might potentially use as a reason to leave you crying into your Ben and Jerry's on a Sunday night, it's all kind of covered under that planning probability section. From there, we move on to section 2, which is all to do with your construction and access considerations. So that's the kind of more common sense logistical side of things. how are you going to get the units to site, how are you going to power them, have you got water hookups, and what really important and really probably the most glamorous element of any project, sewage. It's a real kind of hot button topic across the UK at the moment. Water, the phosphates and nitrate levels in the local water table is a real hot button topic, and as a result there is an awful lot of change in regulation around use of septic tanks, use of water treatment plants. You'll have probably seen there's quite a few water treatment companies here today that are designed to solve that exact problem. So all those kind of glamorous elements is what we cover in section 2, so that you can really get an idea of what am I going to have to do to actually get the site ready for these units to be delivered. So that's the first half of the study. The second half is very much got a financial focus to it. So part 3 is all to do with who you're going to be up against, who's my competition. So we show you exactly that. We'll go and find similar size projects in your area where applicable. So obviously if you're going to put 3 to 4 units in your garden, we're not going to show you a Ho Seasons or a Butlins because it's just not going to be relevant to the market that you're going to be advertising to. We'll show you who they are, where they are, what's their website, are they busy, what are they offering, most importantly, because it's really important to start to get an idea of where your niche might be and what you can use as a kind of unique selling point to help yourself stand out from the crowd a little bit. We'll show you what they're charging per night, what their sort of occupancy rate is, and all of this is designed to really start building a picture of your local market, as well as advise us and help us get to a point where we can go, right, this is what a realistic nightly rate might be for your idea straight out of the gate. And it's important to say that any figures we discuss in these studies are very much geared year 1, day 1. The last thing we want to do as a company is end up with a reputation for selling you a dream that just isn't possible. Otherwise our Google reviews would be full of things like, you told us we'd make X and we just haven't, and obviously that's no way to run a company. So it's very much about what's achievable straight out the gate. And if you do want to have a chat about what that looks like year 2, year 3, year 4, myself and all of the team are always available to have a chat about what that looks like as you escalate and build, hopefully, a return customer base for yourself. And once we've done that, the most important bit, and what we all get into it for, return on investment calculations. Obviously no one gets into glamping to throw their money away, although if you'd like to, I will happily collect it. Feel free to send it my way. But return on investment is the name of the game, and most people are shocked at just how incredible the return on investment can be in this industry. The vast majority of studies we conduct, clients will see a return on investment and indeed a profit in under 2 years. So the rates are fairly incredible if you can get it right. And last but not least, manufacturer and supplier recommendations. As you may have seen if you've been to our stand, we're partnered up with a company called Pod Factory, with a unit in the corner with the sauna, if you've been past. We are incredibly proud of the product that they build and happy to put our name next to theirs. But at the same time, we're not naive enough to think that every customer up and down the United Kingdom is going to want the same type of units. So if you are thinking bell tents, domes, huts, whatever it might be, a different pod manufacturer, heaven forbid, doesn't mean you can't come and talk to us and we can't help you. We'll absolutely base anything that you want on the manufacturers that you've fallen in love with. If you don't know who you want, we will selfishly talk about our products because we like to shout about it. What does the feasibility study look like? These are just a few kind of screenshots of some of the information that's included in a study there. So the very left-hand column is basically your first kind of page that you come to really. It's just a very quick visual summary of how positive or negative each section that I've just discussed with you is going to be, and then an overall rating. So we get it out of the way nice and early, we rip the plaster off. If it's going to be negative, we don't string it out for 25 pages. We let you know straight up front there. That middle column is part of the first section, planning probability, where we give you an overall view of your council's previous behaviour over the previous few years. What's their approval rate like? What's their average decision time like? So as I say, the whole point being that you get more and more information about, okay, if I pull the trigger now, how long am I likely going to have to wait? Can I be open for next season? All that sort of stuff. 72 days, by the way, is an incredibly low average decision time, so don't get your hopes up if you're thinking you might be open by March. That's very, very rare. Typically, you're looking at a minimum of 12 weeks as a response time for the vast majority of councils. And as we get to this time of year and Christmas holidays and stuff start to kick in, that does tend to stretch out a little bit. And then over on the right-hand side there, we start to give you, or try to give you at least, a rough indication of the sort of timeframes you can expect the major hurdles to happen. So when we like to get approved, post-approval, how long is realistic to get your groundworks in place, how long is it going to take to get your units ordered, manufactured, all that sort of stuff. So it's just a very brief overview of some of the detail included there. Next steps. Thank you very much for listening. Ultimately, what to do next, if this is something you feel there would be value to, come down and see me after I've finished, and we've been more than happy to arrange a study for you. One thing I haven't told you is how much we charge for this, because unfortunately it's not free. I'm sorry, guys. Ordinarily we charge $497 plus VAT for a feasibility study. But for anybody here at the show today, we're charging only $297 plus VAT. Turnaround time for those studies is around 4 weeks. So if that's something you'd like to take advantage of, come on down and see me when we've finished, and we can get that all arranged for you. If you're not quite there yet and you just want further chat, a bit more advice, again, come down and see me. I'll give you a card. We can book an advice call in, get to know your project in a little bit more detail and see what kind of help you need. If you haven't got tired of my dulcet tones yet, I'm also the face of our wildly successful multi-platform podcast, and I can really do with the viewer numbers and listener numbers. So the UK Glamping podcast, it's on iTunes, Spotify and YouTube. Please check that out. And of course we can sign you up for our regular newsletter and emails as well. So if you're looking for any information, long story short, come and talk to me. So thank you very much for sitting and listening. More than happy to take any kind of questions you might have and do my best to answer them from there. Anybody got any questions I can help them with?
In terms of setting up a site, your help can start from day zero, just a conception of an idea. Is that right? Or do you need
absolutely.
to have planning already or, funding?
No, absolutely. So we can help from day dot, even if you don't already have the land and this is just a dream that you're thinking about doing. So we can help with identifying land right the way through to obviously talking about land you've already got. Very rare that anyone is sitting on the sort of cash that they can just fund a project like this straight out the gate. So we can absolutely help with things like funding options as well and assist and give you referrals to companies that can help with every single step along the way. So yeah, no matter what stage you're at, come and have a chat to us. We'll be able to steer you in the right direction.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Anybody else? Lady in the middle there.
Hiya. For most glamping pods, would you expect them to have kitchen facilities, or is it just a hotel room sort of thing?
Really good question. It is something we're definitely seeing a lot more of, 100%. So one of the most major considerations is protecting yourself against future saturation of the market. And those little touches definitely seem to make the difference, and they are some of the most ticked kind of options when people are searching for glamping sites through things like pitchup.com. Hot tubs and kitchen facilities are the most ticked ones, shortly followed by barbecues and things like that. So flushing toilet and running showers, number one. But yeah, being able to plug a kettle in and make yourself a cup of tea pretty shortly thereafter. So I would say yes, it's the shortest answer I can give you. Most manufacturers will include a kitchenette of some description as standard, even if it's just a little 2-ring hob. The slightly higher level ones will also include ovens and other bits and pieces, but yeah, I would say where possible, absolutely try and include one.
Are you able to give a rough percentage of what the cost of land would be as a percentage of the overall cost of setting up, say, 6?
I knew I'd get a question that I'd struggle to answer. Really difficult to answer because of the geographical variances in the cost of land. Ultimately, the land doesn't tend to be one of your biggest expenses. Groundworks, utilities, and the units themselves tend to make up the vast majority of your setup costs. As a rough rule of thumb, cost of land, when we're looking at it as an average across the UK, if the land is cheaper than kind of 15 to 20 grand an acre, there's probably a reason for that. And there's probably some sort of restrictive issue there that might prevent you developing a tourism business on it. Anything wildly above that, again, there's probably a reason for that too. It's either in a significantly high demand area or you go from there. But as a rough rule of thumb, anywhere between kind of 15 and 20k and 40 to 50k an acre seems to be the sweet spot that a lot of our customers sit in.
Do you have any structures that can be suspended or put on land that is otherwise difficult to put on hilly areas, stuff like that?
Good question. Yeah, so the most kind of technical one we've ever done is we did do a floating pod on a pontoon on my floating home, which was featured on Channel 4 a few years ago. When it comes to soft land and land that is otherwise potentially unsuitable, it's really tricky. So ourselves, I've not worked with a manufacturer that can suspend it on land that is otherwise not kind of secure, if you like. So historically, the most common base for a pad sit on would have been a concrete pad. So people would excavate, flatten it out, pour a big concrete pad and just sit the unit on that. As we've progressed, planners have realised that they really don't like that because of the impact it has on the land. So the most common base for units now is actually ground screws. And you might have seen a few people at the show that deal with ground screws. That they can go into just about anything, touch wood. So they can go into quite soft silt, they can be put into like suspended and put into struts over lakes and riverbeds and things like that. The only thing they tend to have a real issue with is like really big, hard, like bedrock. So generally there is a solution for most things, but if the entire kind of base is shifting, then you might struggle. So if there's no other questions, thank you very much for coming. Anybody who'd like to have a chat about a study or book a call for a little bit more advice, please come down and see me. Thanks, guys.